Good evening, and welcome to another World of Warships video with Captain Darkwing Glacier. I have recently reached rank 1 in the 9th season of World of Warships, and this is the 5th time that I've reached rank 1. The one thing common to all ranked seasons is frustration, so I thought I'd share some of the things that I've learned that might help you to survive this season and hopefully have a better experience. I apologize if some of this advice seems obvious, but based on what I've seen during ranked play, it is most definitely not obvious. So here we go. By far the most common complaint that I've heard about ranked battles is the lack of teamwork. The truth is, teamwork starts with you. The best way to encourage teamwork is to be a good teammate and to set an example. You can do this as soon as the game starts by using chat to communicate with your team. This doesn't mean you have to have a well-defined plan for your team to execute, but you should have a general idea for what you want to do in the battle, and you should inform your team of your intentions. Tell them what cap you're going for, tell them if you're going to flank, and so on. This will encourage your teammates to do the same. Many players are frequently passive and wait to see what the rest of the team is doing. When the entire team does this, it's a recipe for disaster. When one player takes the lead and specifies his intentions, the rest of the team will follow suit, and before you know it, your team has a plan. As the game progresses, keep talking to your team. Whenever you can, tell them your intentions. Designate your targets so that your team can focus fire. It's worthwhile to tell your team at the beginning of the game to designate their targets. This is obvious, but it's also a good reminder, and it tells the team that you want to work together with them, and if you do it, they will too. When you spot a target in a vulnerable position, that's when you should designate it. More than that, if you land a big hit on an enemy ship and the ship is near dead, designate it immediately so your teammates can finish it off. This is not the time to be selfish and try to get the kill yourself if a teammate can do it for you. The team getting the kill is more important than you getting the kill. Another thing to do is always get the enemy destroyers first. They are low probability shots at long range, but when you make those shots, it can change the entire tone of the game. Your teammates and you always need to focus on the enemy destroyers right at the beginning of the game. In so many games, what happens is that two enemy teams converge on a single capture point, and the battleships are detected first, so the opposing battleships occasionally take pot shots at each other. At long range, these are also low probability hits, and chances are you're going to bounce off of their deck armor anyway. Many times it is much better to hold your fire, wait for the enemy DD to be detected, and then unleash everything you have at it. Much of the time you're going to miss, but if the whole team focuses and succeeds in destroying a DD early, your team will gain a big advantage, and that makes it worth it. Another thing to keep in mind is that the battle can be up to 20 minutes long. You need to be patient and use that time. It's available. What this means is if you're a destroyer, you don't necessarily have to get the initial cap right at the beginning of the game, because doing so can often be suicide when there's an enemy radar cruiser spotting for the team, or if you run into a destroyer in the cap that is a gunboat destroyer and you're not prepared for that, so you need to learn to be patient. Now, if things go wrong and you end up getting killed, it doesn't matter who you are. You can cheer your team on in chat, but there's so much more you can do than that. You don't have to just watch the game and just, hope that your team wins. You can actually continue to contribute. Look at the minimap, look at the big picture, try to identify targets for your teammates, because the chances are they might be all zoomed in, focusing on a target, and they don't have time to look at the big picture. A perfect situation for this is that, here's an example. You have a friendly who is hiding behind an island, and he's in a destroyer or maybe a light cruiser. There's an enemy battleship approaching that island. Now, your teammate is going to stay behind that island and remain hidden because he knows that as soon as he pokes his neck out, he's going to get shot and destroyed by the battleship. The battleship, however, might not either know he's there, or he might be focused on someone else and his guns may be pointed in another direction. The problem is that the guy behind the island doesn't know that. They can't see over the island, they can't see where the battleship's guns are pointed. So what you should do is you look at the enemy battleship, find out where his guns are pointed, and tell your teammates in chat. That way you can tell your teammate, okay, look, he's looking at somewhere else. Now you can come out of cover and fire your spurt of torpedoes. Of course, by saying all this, I don't mean that you need to become some kind of backseat admiral and spam chat with orders for your team. What you can do is provide your team with valuable intelligence and continue to contribute to winning the game. For my last general tip, or more accurately, this is just my opinion, don't curse out your teammates. I know that frustrations can run high during ranked battles, but verbally abusing teammates doesn't help anyone, nor does it help you to win the game. When I see a teammate curse me or another teammate out, I don't retaliate, I just don't even engage with them. So as far as cursing out your teammates, don't be that guy. Just don't. Now for some specifically destroyer advice. As I said just a minute ago, most destroyer players know that they need to cap, but they often don't know when to cap. They often go too early and they end up getting killed. So what you need to do is you need to make sure what kind of radar ships does the enemy have. Does the enemy destroyers have hydro? All these things you have to take into account before you attempt to cap. If the enemy team has the advantage, you need to be patient and do some area denial. Launch your torpedoes into the cap, stay out of detection range, or at the very least, be prepared to make a very rapid exit if you are detected and focused by the enemy. 99% of the time, a live destroyer is more important than getting the cap. The reason for this is, when you are undetected, your mere existence is a threat. Enemy ships will be wary of pushing forward if they know that a destroyer is out there somewhere. They never know when they might blunder into a wall of torpedoes. So remember, simply being alive can deny caps to the enemy. The knowledge that there's an enemy destroyer on the loose can prevent a team from being aggressive, and it can paralyze them. And finally, as a destroyer, your job is to scout for your team. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you're spending the game hiding behind islands or in smoke, the enemy will remain undetected and your team will have nothing to shoot at. This will often mean you only rarely get to use your guns. This is okay. Your job is to spot the targets for your teammates, whose guns are going to do far more damage than yours anyway. Many times you'll be tempted to shoot, but when you do, the enemy will spot you and they're going to do their best to kill you. So if you're going to shoot, make sure that your team get away any good if you open up and you get killed for your trouble. In addition to spotting enemy ships, you also serve as a torpedo screen for your battleships. Do your best to keep yourself between the enemy destroyers and your battleships. If you abandon your battleships to go do something on your own, you risk overextending and losing the support of their guns, as well as leaving them at the mercy of enemy destroyers. Cruisers, for their part, fall into two major categories: radar cruisers and kiting cruisers. The radar cruiser's job, at least in the early game, is relatively static. Your job is to set up and cover such that your radar can spot enemy destroyers that try to move into a capture point. If you are in a radar cruiser, warn your teammates 10 to 15 seconds before you use your radar, so that they can be ready to shoot at any revealed targets. Time and again, I've been in battles when I've fired my guns at a long distance target, only for my teammate to turn on his radar without a warning, and it reveals a much better target that I could have destroyed had I only held my fire until the radar was turned on. Speaking of radar cruisers, if you take a cruiser that is radar capable, always choose radar instead of any other consumable like smoke. This pretty much applies only to British cruisers. Smoke only benefits you, whereas radar benefits the entire team. So don't be selfish, be a team player, and always choose radar. Just like a destroyer being alive is a threat to the enemy, the same thing applies to a cruiser. Destroyers will not enter caps if they value their lives when there is a radar cruiser within range. It's simply suicide. So remember that and realize that even though you're not necessarily doing lots of damage to the enemy, you're keeping them out of that cap, and that is vitally important. It's also common for radar cruisers to focus on the cap that they're covering, and frequently they neglect the big picture. Be aware of the battleship 20 kilometers away that's creeping along your flank. The fact that they're on the other side of the map doesn't mean that they're not a danger. I can't even tell you how many times a radar cruiser thought he was safe because he was not exposed to my teammates who were close to him, only for me and my battleship to delete him from 18 or 20 kilometers away the moment he exposed himself. The other type of cruisers are, for lack of a better term, kiting cruisers. They typically hang back at longer ranges and spam HE on targets of opportunity, primarily battleships. It's important for these cruisers to stay angled, keep turning, and stay at medium to long ranges. I deliberately do not say maximum range because at that range, it's all too easy to move out of your own gun range and then you have to take up precious time getting back to within range so that you can continue to contribute. In addition to harassing the enemy and starting fires, remember that part of your job is to draw enemy fire. Every shot that an enemy battleship shoots at you is a shot that's not used on your teammates. At the ranges at which kiting cruisers operate, as long as you keep angled and maneuvering, the damage will be minimal. Don't hesitate to maneuver to avoid incoming fire, even if it prevents you from firing. Your DPM may suffer, but as with destroyers, you're better off staying alive longer than taking damage early just so you can get one more shot off. Of course, for all types of cruisers, there are some maps where it's more appropriate to provide close support for your destroyers rather than being static like radar cruisers or hanging back like kiting cruisers. There's a time and a place for this, so I don't want to leave the impression that each cruiser has only one role. And finally, battleships. One of the common complaints I've heard from players in ranked battles is about the battleship who stays way back at maximum range, contributes essentially nothing, and then ends up still being at full health while the rest of the team is slaughtered. Don't be that guy. You need to be far enough forward to support your teammates with your guns, as well as to tank enemy fire. This does not mean you should charge headlong into the enemy fleet at the beginning of the battle. In the mid to late game, when you sense that it's time to make your move, get into those caps with the aid of your cruisers. That's the time to get stuck in. If you force your cruisers to go it alone, they will be focused and killed quickly. You need to be the one to tank, and your cruisers will support you with their DPM. As a battleship captain, especially at long range, you need to keep your eyes on the big picture. Look for enemy cruisers that slip out from behind cover. Watch for enemy destroyers who might be flanking. For those battleships that do not bow tank, keep moving, keep turning, and keep changing your speed. This throws off enemy long-range fire and keeps you from being torpedoed. I shouldn't have to say something this basic, but it never hurts to remind yourself of the fundamentals. Finally, don't be afraid to use HE. I've gotten lots of crap from teammates for using HE in my Montana, but sometimes it is appropriate. Some players think that battleships should fire nothing but AP, and in most cases that is true, but when you're facing, for example, a bow-tanking enemy battleship, your AP is just going to bounce. Switching to HE and working with friendly cruisers to spam these battleships with HE can set enough fires to overwhelm their damage control capabilities. When they realize their danger and try to escape, they may turn and expose their broadsides. Anticipate this and be ready with your AP shells. I don't have any specific tips for aircraft carrier players, as aircraft carriers are so rare in ranked play to begin with. Those players that are good at aircraft carriers will know what they're doing, and so the last thing that they need is any advice from me. Finally, in the interests of promoting a more positive community, if you have a good teammate or a worthy opponent during a game, compliment them during the game in chat, and also by using the compliment feature. It's what it's there for. Most of us are in this game to have fun, so let's act like it and be respectful. So that about wraps it up for my advice for ranked battles. If you decide to take the plunge and try ranked battles, I wish you the best of luck and the minimum amount of frustration. Have fun. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of this battle, and I'll see you next time.
Torpedoes to port.